Okay, so we're going to learn a piece from the Kesser Shem Tov. It's a lesson or piece called Reish Ayin Vav. It's 276 in the Kesser Shem Tov. So the Baal Shem Tov is starting from a Gemara. So I want to jump. Well, first, let's learn the Gemara together inside. Gemara says like this. I'm R Yose. I was in a brisa. R Yose said, once I was once I was traveling on the road, and I entered one of the old churvas, one of the old ruins of Yerushalayim to daven. So Eliyahu Eliyahu HaNavi, Gvalti came, V'shamar ala Pesach, ad shesiyamti tfilasi. And he was waiting for me by the door to the churva until I finished davening. After I finished davening, Amar li shalom alecha Rabbi. He said to me, peace unto you, my teacher. I responded to him, shalom alecha Rabbi Umari. Peace unto you, my teacher and my master. So Eliyahu HaNavi said to me, B'ni, Gevalt, my boy, why did you go into this ruin? It's dangerous to go into a ruin. So I told him, Lispalal, I wanted to daven. And he said back to me, why don't you just daven on the road where you're traveling? So Rabbi Yossi said back to him, I didn't want people who were walking by to interrupt me and to make me lose focus. And he said back to me, if that's the case, you didn't want to lose focus, you're worried about losing focus, you should have davened the short tefillah, right? It's also in brachas, it's called tefillas havinenu, and it's a short abridged version of Shemona Esrei. So Rabbi Yossi said about this incident, he said, at that time I learned three things. I learned that you shouldn't enter a ruin. I learned that a person should daven when he's on a journey. He could just daven continuing on the way. He doesn't have to pull himself off to the side. And I also learned that when somebody's on the path, he should daven a short tefillah, a tefillas havinenu, but not a full version of this. So the story Bechlal is an interesting story, and obviously we learn a lot from it. But before we even get into the Baal Shem Tov, in the Ein Yaakov, the Ein Yaakov is a short compiled, not short. It's a compilation of all of the Agada Gemaras of Shas, and so over there he has his own pirush on it. So I think the Ein Yaakov was about 500 years old, Mashu Kazeh. So he came before the Baal Shem Tov. So I'll tell you his pshat. He says that Rabbi Yossi was worried about the fact that the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed and it still hadn't been rebuilt. And so he wanted to daven. He wanted to mamash daven, like, to bring the ultimate geula and Mashiach, etc. And so Eliyahu HaNavi came over to him and he said, why'd you enter this ruin? Meaning, why'd you go dafka into such a tefillah with such intensity? Like you went and you're davening so strongly, like you're trying to force Shemayim, so to speak. And also it almost seems like you're questioning Hashem's ways. So Rabbi Yossi said, no, I only entered to pray. I wasn't mamish trying to question Hashem and what his actions are in this world and his midos. I was just going to daven, just simple tefillah. So Eliyahu HaNavi said to him, you should have davened on baderach. He said, so Eliyahu HaNavi was telling him that Gevalt, the time has not yet come for Mashiach. And therefore your main focus of tefillah shouldn't have been for the geula. It should have been for survival through the galus. And being able to not only survive through the galus, but be malal l'nitzaitis as we go through the galus. So Rabbi Yossi said, I was afraid to daven for such a thing, just to daven to survive the galus, because I was afraid that the galus itself, meaning that the nations of the world that are mamish, like, persecuting Am Yisrael, that we were not going to be able to survive through a whole journey. So I figured it's better that I should daven for a geula than I should daven to survive through the galus. So Eliyahu said back to him, even so, you should have davened a short tefillah, meaning that you're right, that maybe you want to daven for the gulas, but when you're in galus, you can't sit and kvetch on davening for the geula. It's not the time for it yet, and could be even if we would get into it and begin to cry over all the incredible challenges and the tragedies of the Galus, we wouldn't be able to come out of it. Like it would become too overwhelming for us. So Rabbi Yose said about this, he said, I learned three things. I learned that it's wise for a person not to delve too deeply into davening for the Galus and for the long delay of Mashiach. Obviously, this is also back then. So it might have changed over history. We'll talk about that in a minute. And we shouldn't try to like reckon the time of their arrival. The second, that we should learn that a person should daven on the road, meaning we should daven for survival through Galus. Don't just daven for the Yeshua, but when you're in a tzara, when you're struggling, you should also daven that you should be able to make it through the journey that you're traveling for. And thirdly, that our tefillas that we're davening about the tsar that we're currently struggling with, don't get too overwhelmed in the tragedy. Like, don't get stuck in like, oh, my life is so bad, because if you really get into it too much, you might get overwhelmed by that. So think about it. We could already stop over there, but we're not going to. We're going to go into what the Kesser Shem Tov says also. But this is an incredibly deep lesson. And just as a side note, we say that we shouldn't reckon the time. So there was a lot of tzaddikim that spoke about this, and right now I'm not recalling the name of the tzaddik who wrote a whole piece on this, and he was saying that at the beginning of the Galus, for people to begin to be machashev and to reckon the time of when Mashiach's going to come, it's not proper. He said it's like a story. It's like there's a father and a son, and the father's taking his son from the farm, and they're traveling to the big city for the market. And it's a 2-week trip to the market, and they get into the wagon, and they start driving out of the farm, and the kid goes, "Are we there yet?" And the father looks at him and says, "Fool, we're not even leaving the farm. We just left the farm 20 minutes ago. You're already asking for me to know if we're there yet?" And so the kid was embarrassed. So he waited 2 hours, 3 hours, finally 4 hours. He asked his father, "Are we there yet?" And his father looked at him and said, "Didn't I just tell you? Don't ask me for when we're going to get to there. We're just leaving. It's a few hours." So the kid was quiet. And finally they traveled a few days, and it's like, a week and a half, almost 2 weeks. And the father turns to the driver and he says, "Nu, are we there yet?" And so the kid looks at his father and goes, "You yelled at me for asking if are we there yet, and now you yourself are asking the driver?" So the father looks at his kid and goes, "My son, I love you so much. When we were like a few hours, 20 minutes, a few hours, a day even, out of leaving the Beis Hamikdash, so you don't sit there saying, when's the Galus going to be over, when's the Galus going to be over. But when we're 2,000 years at the end of the Galus, Gavalt, we need to be talking about the Geula, or else we mamish lost it." So the Gemara over here it's referring to that, meaning that at that point in time we can't be davening so much for the Geula, but now Gavalt at the end of time, if we're not talking about the Geula, then what are we talking about? Okay, so let's now enter this piece from the Kesser Shem Tov. So the Baal Shem Tov says like this: Shemati Mimari Baal Shem Tov, Be'inyan Rabbi Yose. Right, I heard from the Baal Shem Tov on the story about Rabbi Yose. Rabbi Yose said, at that time, I learned from Eliyahu HaNavi 3 things. That I shouldn't enter into one of the ruins of Yerushalayim. What does this mean to say? That Gamshin is damen b'maisa oini v'inoi val karcha chukdei sheyispalo. So we know that this needs a little bit of a explanation over here, because it's short, what he's saying over here. But we know that the Baal Shem Tov teaches in many, many, many places that the Avodah, the reason why a person gets hit with struggles and gets hit with pain and struggles from whatever it might be in this world is really only to bring him to an awareness that there's a chisaron in the world, and that he needs to fix that. And even more, that there's a chesaron in the world, on a deeper level, that there's a chesaron in the Shekhinah. And that means that there's a tikkun that we need to do. So how does Hashem communicate to us that we need to fix that, to do tikkun HaShekhinah, to daven for the Shekhinah herself? So he says that's why Hashem tells us about our issue. And this is a concept that's not limited to Chassidus. This is across the board. The Chavetz Chaim talks about it in Likutei Amarim. Everybody, this is like a very, very, very fully accepted concept across the board. And we need to daven for Tikkun HaShechina. The Baal Shem Tov threshes it out even more that it's dafka, the reason why we have struggles, the reason why we have pain, the reason why we have issues is dafka to be megala to us what the deeper issues are up in Shemayim. However, the Baal Shem Tov says, Mikol makam eich yispala. How should a person daven? Meaning, when a person has a pain, how should he daven to Hashem? What's the form of his tefillah? And this is like a great question that people ask. I'm supposed to force Hashem? What does tefillah even really do? So if tefillah can change Hashem's will, does it mean I can control Hashem? I can change God's will? So what do I do? If a person has a struggle, and this is obviously coming to Megala, this Chesar and the Shechina, how does he daven? So the Baal Shem Tov says, Tzarich lechalkel hadavar b'mishpat. A person has to be very careful not to overwhelm, but he has to bring it out with using mishpat, not overly doing it, not becoming too extreme, not going crazy in his tefillah. Sheyu l'ratzon lo yisbarach. V'lo behechrech sheikanis ba'oivi akaira. He says a person should daven in a way that it should be pleasing to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and not in a forceful way that Hashem has to answer my tefillah. Hashem has to give it to me. So this is like he says Umasha Amar she'ein nechnasam lechurba daika v'klal gadol b'tefillah kasher shamati b'zeh mefarish mipi Mari. So this is a major rule in tefillah. So this is a major lesson in tefillah that we have to all know is don't try to force your hand. And it's interesting how people understand this, meaning there's a certain level that sometimes through tefillahs we can cause a new reality to take place. And so to speak, Hashem created in this world that if we daven in a very, very strong and powerful way, the mamish can change the reality. And there's a danger there. There's a danger because what if it's going to change the reality, so to speak, force God's hand into something that's really not good for you? So then you might say, well, how could that be? Through davening, could I force God's hand to something that's not good for you? So I want to read you another Gemara that I found very powerful, and yeah, it's a very it's a scary Gemara, but it's important. So the Gemara says, it's Gemara in Mayid Katan, Daf Yud Ches Amud Beis, and the Gemara over there says, is it possible that another person's tefillas could cause another person to lose his shidduch, right? So it says somebody else could, through tefillah, can affect somebody else's zivug. So there's definitely more than one way to learn this Gemara, and I'm actually going to explain it not using the pshat of Rashi, because Rashi's pshat is a little bit harder to understand. There's some complications, but the way that, so I'm going to give this pshat. So the Gemara says, Tihad de Rava. There was a story involving Rava. That he heard of a certain man, he was davening to Hashem, and this is the words that he was saying. Tizdamen li planisa. Let Hashem, please give me this woman. So Amar Lei, Rava heard him saying it, and he said, we don't daven like this. If she's meant for you, then you won't lose her. And if not, kafratba. Meaning, so it's a shayla how to read this, meaning that either you could mamish, you're going to be denied, or you're gonna mess things up for you. So the Gemara continues and says, Basar hachi shami de kamar. I guess it was a few years later, Rava heard this guy davening, and he was saying, Aihu lemus mikama, please let me die before her, or Aihi tamas mikame, or let her die because I can't handle it. And Amalei and Rava said to the guy, Lava mina lach leitibar ala de mosa achi. Did I not tell you not to daven this way? So we see from here that the man seems to have controlled God, so to speak, with his tefillah, that through his tefillah, he got something that wasn't good for him, and it caused such negativity in his life that he Pasha was going out of his mind, and he was like, Hashem, I need you to either kill me or kill her, like, I can't handle this. I heard over said a number of years back. I heard said over in the name of a Bresler. I don't remember who it was. That when a person's davening, the koach of tefillah is so powerful, but we have to be careful how we daven. It's mamish this piece of the Baal Shem Tov that a person has to be like yichalkel devarav v'mishpat, and that it should be in your tefillah should be in a way of ratzah, not like I'm trying to force that I know better than God. And they would say, so they said a mashal like this. There's a yidla is davening by Rabbi Nachman's kever. It's in Ukraine, in the middle of a cold winter, and there's snow 2 feet high, and he's standing by the tzion, and he's davening to Hashem, and he's saying, Hashem, I don't have boots. Please give me boots. Please give me boots. And he's mamish davening so strong. But then he pauses, and he looks up, and he picks up his hands to Shemayim, and he looks up at the skies, and he says, Hashem, but if it's not your ratzon, and if it's not the right thing for me to have boots right now, then please just give me the das to understand that this is your ratzon, and it's not for me right now. And I think that that's a very beautiful mashal and a beautiful illustration of mamish of what the Baal Shem Tov is saying over here, of how we need to daven, is that we need to mamish daven in a way that is compelling. It's real, it's authentic. We believe that our tefillas mamish can change the reality, but we have to know you can't force a reality if it's not meant to be. And we've heard so many stories, so many tzaddikim about they thought it was the right thing to bring Mashiach, and they tried to do it, and all sorts of crazy things happen. But a lot of not healthy and not good things come out of trying to force it, trying to force something that's not supposed to be. So that's the first thing. As a person, we need to know not to force it, to accept it, but that the tefillah should be a nachas ruach to Hashem. And even if the taka is going to be able to create a new reality in the world, it should also be l'ratzon l'fnei Hashem yisparach. So that's the first piece. Then the Baal Shem Tov continues, and what's the next thing of R Yose? V'lamadnu shemispalin baderech v'zeh. V'lamadnu shemispalin baderech v'hainu derech harabim. Says that when a person, what does it mean that a person, Baal Shem Tov says on a deeper level, what does it mean that a person should daven baderech? Is that a person should go and daven not as an individual alone, separate from the kehila, separate from friends, separate from the whole rest of the world. He should dafka daven with everybody else. And he says, what's the pasuk that we learned this out from? And the Baal Shem Tov uses this pasuk for many, many, many inyanim in understanding tefillah. But one way he says, Kanemoni pasuk tefillah la'ani hiyatayv. So, and he says, She'evin perish pasuk zeh gam kein al yidei she'elas Eliyahu zecharnu levracha. He says that the Baal Shem Tov himself understood this pshat in the pasuk of tefillah ani kiyatayv. Now, what does it mean that the tefillah for the ani, that the ani kiyatayv, when he wraps himself up? So, pashup pshat is that he wraps himself up. He's so focused and he's so overwhelmed by the pain that he's suffering that he cries out to Hashem. And it says that what's the highest level of tefillah? Tefillah Moshe, tefillah David, or tefillah ani. So the Gemara says tefillah ani is the highest. Why? Because only by tefillah ani does it say v'lifnei Hashem yishbech sichai, which is an incredible thing. Only mamash lifnei Hashem yishbech sichai. So he says that because the Indian is tefillah ani kiyatayf. If the ani is misatayf, he doesn't go it alone. And the truth is, this is especially poignant when we're talking about somebody in a personal tragedy or in personal pain and suffering. Is that when a person's davening and he's coming from a place of feeling incredible pain and feeling like, oh my gosh, this is my issue, this is my tzara, this is so painful for me, is he can allow himself to become overwhelmed by the fact that I'm feeling this, that makes him mamish become a yachid. If he knows on a very deep level that Hashem's giving this to me because this is what's the form of Hashem communicating to me and letting me know what is it that I need to fix. How can I fix this? And that's why Hashem's giving me the pain. It's not stam that I'm having it. So then a person won't go it alone. He won't try to be separate. He's not going to separate himself from, oh, everybody else is okay, but poor me, I have my own negativity. He doesn't allow himself to get stuck in his own smallness. And he's misatif with the rabbim. He joins in together with the rabbim. He recognizes that I'm part of Am Yisrael, and everybody has their own pekel, and we each have our own thing. But Gavalt, together we can each support each other. We can be supported by our friends, and we can support our friends, and we can gather together in a tefillah, and that's the way that we need to daven. Gewalt, which is a very important lesson as well. And the third thing is v'lamalti shemispal b'derech mispal tefillah katzara havinenu, and that a person who's davening on the path, who's davening on the journey, and he doesn't, and Gewalt, people can come interrupt him. He says the person should learn. So Baal Shem Tov says, what does this mean? Perush havanas hatfila b'lei kavana v'divrei pi chacham chen. Simply to understand the words of tefillah without trying. Sometimes people try to get themselves onto such a deep level. He goes, you should have to understand. Sometimes when you're on the path, when you're traveling through your life, dafka when you're in the galus, just daven. Just simply daven. It doesn't have to be the best davening that you ever had. You don't have to always try so hard to be in the highest places. Excuse me. Simply just davening like a mensch with pirush hamilas. That is what the Eibishter wants from us. And to be real and authentic, that this is where I am and this is where I need to be. So I know that when I read this piece, this was mamash incredibly profound, these three lessons in Tefillah. So Bezrat Hashem, Shemamish be able to grow from these words, and we should be able to use these lessons to daven. Once again, we should learn to daven that when we know, even when we know that we're having a pain, and that pain is coming to teach us about the pain of the Shekhinah, we shouldn't let it overwhelm us and get too intense in that pain. We should do it in a way that, we should daven in a way that's l'ratzon, and not trying to compel God's hand as if we know better, but davening to the best of our abilities. Hashem, this is the das that you gave me of the situation. I'm davening to you from this place. Mima'amakim karasicha Hashem. And you give it to me, you answer me in the way, Hashem, you from a place of archava, you know what the best thing in the world is for this world. So please, you give it in the right and proper way. Which mamash also connects to davening for the churva. I heard in the name of a lot of tzaddikim that they would say, that people would say, oh, the Mashiach should come. And Gewalt, they would say, let Mashiach come in its proper time. We want it to come where not even one person, not even one yidla is going to get hurt by the pains of Mashiach. Sometimes if you try to push it too hard, too fast, we don't want to have another Holocaust. Hashem should give it to us in a healthy and sweet way. We're not trying to compel him, but Gewalt, we're going to daven in a way that's l'ratzon. As we said, the second thing is a person should daven with his friends, that on the derech, that you should be connected with others. Don't be a yachid, don't separate yourself from everybody else. Daven together. And simply that when you're on the way, it's good just to daven simple pirush hamila, simple, just understand, read what you're saying, say the words, word after word, and offer it up as a carbon to Hashem. And may we be zeicher that Hashem should answer our tefillas berachamim, with sweetness, with goodness, in a way that's good for us, in a way that's good for the world, in a way that's good for Hashem. And we should be zocha. Mamash to see the gula shleim of B'mher v'yameinu. Berachamim. Amen.